How you doing? It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Hi. I just took this out of the refrigerator here at the studio. Bob doesn't know I took this. It's let's see what this is. It's from the deli across the street. Oh, look at this. Italian hero combo. Oh, this is going to be good. Oh, I'm going to eat the whole thing right now. I'm going to eat the whole thing. You'll never know. You'll never know it's missing. Oh, boy. Oh, boy, oh, boy. It's a bubbling. It's a training. It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Anybody got a BC powder? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My name is Bob Smith. You might remember me from my days with Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. And you know who really remembers me from those days is Howard Baum. We were both in the wrestling world at about the same time, and we were in different places at different times and never really got to know each other, even though I remember reading the name in bylines. He was a wrestling photographer. All the way from those photos he did so well, all the way to the 605 SuperPodcast on the Arcadian Vanguard Network with Brian Last. You know Howard, he's a big internet presence, social media master. He does great stuff there. And he's multifaceted, very varied guy, and a real thinker. This guy is really different. I think you're going to enjoy this particular podcast. It'll be a little longer than our usual show, but you know what? I want to hear what he had to say, and I think you will too. I get interviewed. He's going to interview me at the beginning of this conversation. We're going to talk about my blues music career. You know I was a blues singer, right? You see me on Facebook singing with B.B. King. Well, there's a lot to it. And Howard is the first person to ask me about it. So I said, what the heck? Sure, I'll answer your questions about that. We talk a little bit about the days at Pro Wrestling Illustrated. We talk about wrestling magazines. We talk about today's stuff, the good and the bad. It's free form, just like we always do. So you know what? Get a hot toddy, get a ginger ale, get it whatever your old bones care for, because we're gonna talk. Howard's quite a personality, so get ready for this. We're gonna have our usual commercial announcement, and then it's Howard Baum. You're gonna like this one. We'll see you in a few minutes. Well, as so many of you know now, the Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia podcast network. And things are going along swimmingly, and their shows are getting hotter all the time. Let's take a look at what's been going on. First off, I think I mentioned this on a previous show, but I want to make sure you know it. Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert is now, drumroll please, Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich on every episode. So that's two of the biggest stars in NWA and Memphis history on the same podcast all the time. Here's a look at more of the WrestleCopia podcast productions. How about the Wrestling Memory Grenade? Every episode takes a look back at a moment in wrestling history with our good friend Ray Russell. Retro Wrestling Review. A recent episode takes a look at USWA from 1993 and Papa Shango and that whole scene. You're going to want to check out all of those podcasts, including the Other Ship podcast. You never know what that wacky bunch is going to talk about on that show. And it's a really good one, and it's one of the most unique wrestling podcasts you'll ever listen to. There's the Outdated Wrestling Hour with some old fart babbles on. It's ridiculous. Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty has been on quite a hot streak as of late. Tons of superstar wrestlers have been on the show. Recently, they've had Baron Von Raschke, Jerry Oates, and you name it, they've been on it. But it's the Regional Wrestling Podcast. Every episode is a look back to a particular period in that history. Really interesting podcast is DJ's Puro Wrestling Academy, which looks back at Japan and wrestling from the Orient. It's a real history lesson in every show. Making headlines of late is Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop. Of course, you remember Bob Roop, from scientific legend to, shall we say, demonic rule breaker under the auspices of Kevin Sullivan. He talks about it all on that great podcast. There's the Captain's Corner, GrappleCon, TR Shocks the World, the Glory Days GrappleCon cast, the WrestleCopia News Network, the Power Hour, and given the way things are going, a lot more to come. Take time to check out the podcast from WrestleCopia. Well, how do I find them, you may ask? Real simple, WrestleCopia.com. And you can find us there too, most of our recent episodes. It's worth your time. Come on, ring the bell with us and jump in the ring. You know, this wrestling stuff is very strange because you find people fluke-wise that have done the same things you have, are into the same things you are, and you never met them, but everybody's met both of us, which is a very, very strange thing. But here's a guest our paths have never crossed before, and I've never talked to this gentleman before, but I have a feeling you all know him. His name is Howard Baum. How are you?
Hey. And you even got the pronunciation right. I am so impressed. I'm so happy and elated to be here. Speaking to you, one of the cast of fictional characters that edited the famous After magazines.
That's right.
You, of course. And many other fictional characters. Bill Apter. I know that he is something that you guys came up with to fool the fans.
If you know Bill, you're probably right about that.
No, he's a real guy and he's a good guy. And he was very nice to me when I was a kid. And let me ask you this. I'm a little remiss because our paths have never really crossed. What years were you the editor-in-chief of PWI?
Oh, I was never editor-in-chief. I was managing editor.
Okay.
But there was a hierarchy there. Stu Sachs became the publisher, and Craig Peters was the managing editor before I was. And then everybody moved up a step, and they I think my last 2 years, 2 years that they promoted me to managing editor, I had been associate editor. I got the job in 88.
Oh, okay.
And it was a total fluke. I always tell this story. I was two-line ad in the New York Times. And I had been a sports editor and writer, and I had done some boxing. And I think when they hired me as a boxing wrestling hybrid guy. Like I'd work, because they did KO magazine, later got the Ring magazine and stuff. And, you know, I was a sports editor and a long-time writer. So I did that for a while, but I kind of stuck to the wrestling because I liked it better. You know, I knew more about it, actually. Even though I covered Mike Tyson, because the newspaper I worked for was in the same town that Tyson trained in. Made my whole career. My whole damn career. I mean, a total fluke. So anyway, to make a long story short, I just I answered it in the New York Times. It was just that fluky, but I had been a voracious wrestling fan, tape trader, magazine collector, you name it, like everybody else.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, because a lot of the wrestling editors that I know actually they didn't have a journalism background, but they had a wrestling background. There's
the thing about London publishing where I work for, and I say this a lot when I'm talked about it on other podcasts too, on other people's podcasts, is that London tended to hire experienced writers and editors. So their wrestling magazines were done by professional writers and editors who just happened to like wrestling, as opposed to many wrestling magazines, which were run by wrestling fans trying to be editors and writers. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm not saying that, because I like the Norman Kietzer magazines and a lot of the other competing I've read them growing up, you know, but it was just the difference between the companies. And I noticed that right away.
Yeah, well, no question about it. As a fan growing up as a kid, the difference was obvious and palpable, because even though the After magazines, if you will, were completely kayfabe, obviously they were well done. It's kind of like WWE. It's the number one game in town. While you guys were busy with your A magazine, I was toiling away in the Mike O'Hara brands, which I consider like the C or D paper of your magazines, Main Event, stuff like that. And the editors of a lot of these magazines seem to have a background in wrestling, but not necessarily editing. So you would get a very interesting wrestling product out of it because it wasn't necessarily within the rules of normal editing, writing, publishing. They were a little faster and looser. I think the Mike O'Hara magazines of the 80s were kind of the spiritual descendant of your old 70s wrestling review, all of those sensationalistic bloody covers, apartment
Yeah.
wrestling kind of thing. And that was always more my kind of vibe anyway.
Now you're referring to the Mike O'Hara. That I'm completely lost. What is that?
Yeah, the you never heard of that?
No.
The Mike O'Hara magazines of the 80s, that was my bread and butter. And
And
believe it or not,
what title? But what titles were there?
oh my God, how long have you got? We have celebrity wrestling, double action wrestling.
All right,
All
now I know. Now I know what you're talking about. Okay.
yeah. So they paid very little, but the beauty of it as a photographer was that you could advertise your own stuff. So I sold my photos and videos in the back of the magazine. They paid just about the same amount that the After magazines did. In your day, do you happen to have any idea what you paid a photographer per photo?
Oh, when I worked there?
Yeah.
Oh, it depended on the photographer and what the assignment was, but it wasn't a whole lot. They probably made $50, I guess.
50 per photo?
Yeah.
You're not talking about a cover shot?
No. Just
okay.
Just
you know what?
Or they got paid for a job. It was different with London. I think they paid you for doing a specific job. Like if you went and covered Memphis, we would just buy everything you had, and then you would get a set fee.
Oh, I
for
gotcha.
That. And I don't know. You know what? I went on to edit other national magazines after I left there, and I know it was another world because it was a bigger national magazine. We were paying like $1,500 for photo sets, believe it or not.
Oh my goodness! You should have given me a call. My God!
Yeah, I know, but it wasn't like that at the wrestling magazines. I'll tell you that. I don't think anybody ever made nearly that much on a whole set. So I don't know what to say other than it was Apter who set that stuff up. He was the photo editor there.
Paid Apter, and I'll tell you my whole tortured photographer origin story in a second regarding Apter and the Apter magazines and everything. When Apter did use my photos, and I think it was just to get me off his back, because I was a young shaver at the time and I was just coming up. I wasn't even ringside yet, but I was close. And my dream had always been to be a wrestling photographer. And I'll tell you how all that happened through your company. But Bill was always nice as could be to me. He knew I wanted to be a photographer. I was a photographer. Started bringing my camera with me since 1975 when I was 9 years old to the Miami Beach Convention Center. Well, by 1980, my photos finally started coming out. And I got them published in the Wrestling News with Jim Melby and Norman Keitzer.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they gave everybody their start, as you probably know. Cornette, Paulie Dangerously, Eddie Gilbert, all of us were photographers. One of us didn't make it. But we're all photographers for those guys. Salt of the Earth, Jim Melby is no longer with us. Norman Keitzer is, God bless him. And so after used a few of my photos, and to get back to my original thing, you know how much they paid in approximately, I think it was 1980, 81, they used a few of my photos. $7 a photo. The princely sum of $7 a photo.
I believe it.
And the thing is, I like shooting in color. And after you had to shoot black and white, and it's kind of my dream. I felt that my birthright was going to be ringside photographer for the Apter magazines in Miami, period. I was at the right time, the right age, and the man who was Apter's man in Miami, Paul Bauman, he looked old when I started going in 75. Here it is, 82. I just moved up to ringside because we convinced Duke Kiyomoka that I was a force to be reckoned with. And how that happened was not through the proper channels, much as is always the case in professional wrestling. It wasn't my credentials and my hard-earned package that I presented to him. It was one guy saying something to another guy, and the next week I was in. So if you want to hear it, I can tell you about it. I hate to prattle on.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is the art.
My audience knows what I sound like. You keep talking.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing about when I was a kid, I would buy the Ben Strong wrestling pictorials and the photo albums and everything, and I would see all these wrestling photos. And I became just enamored with just the drama contained within a simple wrestling photo, the geometry of the photos and the bodies in relation to the ropes. And at 8 years old, I was looking at the composition of photos and saying, you know, if I was going to take that photo, I'd be standing there, and look what this guy did. And so Theo Errett was like my god, and I worshipped at his altar, and I looked at all these photos.
I'll just chime in. He was awesome.
Oh my God.
Awesome photographer.
There isn't even, I mean, he's like number 1 and 2, and then 3 comes after that, because nobody shot photos like Theo Errett.
No.
And I looked at his rig. He had like some tiny camera. So it's like the guitar players, the magic has got to be in the fingers, right? Because he didn't look like he had any kind of a special, I was going to say guitar, but Jesus, Theo Errett, man. So as a young kid, and I'm growing up, and I'm 9 years old, watched my first TV show in 74 out of LA, the Lucha Libre. Then, bunch of the kids in my class in Miami wanted to go to wrestling at the Miami Beach Convention Center in 1975. Pete Adlerberg, not Pete Letterberg, Pete Adlerberg is like, we're all going to go. Well, my parents raised me like a veal. They didn't let me out of the house. They weren't going to let me go with the crazy guy down the street or the crusty guy working on his Camaro over there. So my dad takes me to wrestling. But the thing is, my dad was always a wrestling fan, so this is a pleasure. Well, he took me to my first show, August 23rd, 1975. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of me as a wrestling photographer, because I brought my camera that night just for the heck of it. And I was obsessed with getting better and better and better. And as I saw these magazines, I said, that's my goal. That's my destiny. And I would see Paul Baum in there with his gray hair. And I was 14, 1980. I go, that's going to be me, bud. It's going to be me. All he has to do is choke on one shrimp, you know, one bad night. And this whole thing is mine.
Oh, geez.
So I met Apter around this time. Couldn't have been nicer. As you know, his dad was the timekeeper in West Palm Beach for many, many years. Nate Apter, I believe his name was. And Bill would give me a mercy sale every once in a while so I could claim PWI and I believe a sports review as credits, technically, but I was never the guy. Well, guess what? I ended up quitting photography for a while and going to college. And Paul Bauman went strong for years and years until Florida closed down. So that Apter magazine saga has stuck in my craw forever. I felt it was my birthright and I was robbed of it. But the whole photography thing has a happy ending because the Apter photographers, as you may know, and I hate to keep referring to it as Apter, maybe I should refer to it as the Smith Mags.
No. They were never my company. I not even close. I wasn't there long enough. I was there at the ass end of the popularity of the magazines too. I started in '88. No, they could never be the Smith magazines.
Well,
I made my mark there. You know, okay. I did a lot of good things there, but no, I always refer to myself as the Martin Short of London publishing.
Shut up! That is my number one guy. Get the hell out of here.
The reason I'm the Martin Short.
Oh, get out!
Is because he joined the SCTV cast as a replacement late in the network run.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did with PWI. I replaced somebody there late in their, what I call, just because it was the Rockville Center years, the glory years there, because they're in Pennsylvania now. I was there from 80 till the time they moved away in 93 or 94 to Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And things were dire in the early 90s. My God.
There's a confluence of things going on in publishing. Then you had the sheets that were coming out, and people were kind of, the older fans, I think, were turning from the magazines to the sheets and then there was the immediacy of the internet, which was new at that time. So all these things, I think, eroded wrestling magazines. Like back in the day, dude, we used to put an article out. It would be 6 weeks before it hit the newsstand.
I know.
Yeah, five angles would go on in between the time we wrote it and put it out, you know? So it was always hard. It was always hard to stay timely. And I
No,
think
you
the
guys
media,
were way behind, and I was contributing to Power Slam at that time. And when you factor in the difference between continents and everything, it was like their April issue came out in like December here. There was already 8 different new world champions by then, and they're like,
Mhm. Yeah,
the
yeah.
the up and comer was on the washed up independent circuit by then already. Like
Sure.
because you're a magazine guy, that this has come up before, but you guys from Apter and Napolitano and you and everyone involved, the magazines were the kingmakers back then, bar
Oh,
none, bar none.
I mean, when Bruno Sammartino did his acceptance speech for the WWE Hall of Fame, he lauded the magazines as a contributing factor to his success worldwide. Because there was a time before the internet, before cell phones, before all the things that we look upon now. In the territory days, the only way you'd find out about a wrestler you didn't know about was to read about him in the magazines. That was literally it, because newspapers didn't cover wrestling. So you only found out about new stars or stars from out of town by looking at the magazines. And when somebody that you'd seen in the magazine ends up in your territory, it was always exciting. Oh, I know him. I saw him in the magazines.
Big time.
That is why they really were important in communicating to wrestling fans, I think, in their day. I think they were vital.
Big
And
time.
now everything has changed completely. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but
Worse.
that's the way it was back then. Oh, no. Don't get me started on some of today's stuff.
Oh no, we have a world of stuff to get into, my friend. I have a big feeling we're kindred spirits. And by the way, let me insert this. I love my wordsmith / wrestling friends and associates. You, Greg Oliver, Dan Murphy. I really, and I know there's a good one that I'm leaving it. Brian, of course, Brian Solomon.
Brian, he's totally amazing to me. He's the only guest I've had on this podcast. So when I first contacted him, my knees were shaking because I have such no, listen, I'm a writer. You know me, I'm an old school writer, and I consider him to be the best of today's breed of real journalists that are out there.
Definitely.
So when I'm contacting, I was thinking like, geez, he's going to think I'm old kayfabe Bob from the old days. And he worked at PWI too and still does.
Right.
So it's like, what's he going to think? And he went, oh no, I'd love to talk. I know who you are. So we've hit it off. We've been on each other's shows like 8 times or something already. So it's like we have a budding friendship. And you know what? I started a second podcast called The Entertainment Hour, where he is just knocking it out of the park. He's been on twice. We just did one about B movies. It just made the series. I'm telling you, we're rolling with that one now too.
I have that saved to check out as I do a bunch of yours and a bunch of his. Mm-hmm. There is just so much content out there these days, man. I don't think I'd have the time to listen to my own podcast if I had one.
I agree. And it takes me, I'm such a audio junkie, a cockeyed perfectionist that you and I will talk for an hour and it'll take me another 4 hours until it's ready to be released. That's how much work I do on these things,
Right.
And you know what? I'm not complaining a bit, because when I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm 26 years old again. And it feels like we're peers and we're talking about the stuff we've really enjoyed in the past. Nothing replaces that, man. And through these podcasts, I've been able to reconnect with all my old PWI compadres back in the day. I've seen Craig Peters in person, Bill After, like we just talked about. I mean, it's been great. I'm having a blast. And, I don't know how many more moments I have left on this mortal coil, but I intend to have as much fun as I can on my way.
Definitely.
I'll tell you that.
Getting old business. And
that's why it's outdated, man. We're outdated.
It's funny because the whole theme this week was, and I try not to dwell on it, and I even try to maintain I'll give you a little inside Howard baseball here. I try to kayfabe my age and everything, because the minute you say, oh, I'm an old broken down bag of leaves, everyone's like, oh, that's that old guy. He even said it himself. So I try to, perception is reality, and I try to Vince McMahon it. I look good for my age, which I still try not to reveal. But the point of it is, I have prostate surgery coming up, hernia surgery coming up. I just went through a cystoscopy. I look like Hollywood man. I have a knee brace on. I have a Band-Aid from recent blood work. I have a band that doesn't exist for the past 30 years t-shirt on. It's like I'm turning into Florida man. But, however, the silver lining is this. I think guys like us have it right. You're embracing the old and new. Brother, I love somebody who does a clever turn of phrase. And when you talk about a couple of incidents happened that brought my age to light. And because I met somebody and I had something to give him, and he goes, do you watch any wrestling? I'm like, no, not in a long time. He goes, I kind of got into this and that and WWF. I go, how old are you? Just out of curiosity. To me, once you're a certain age, you think everyone's 50. So I'm like, he's like 36. I'm like, and like Methuselah, I go, oh my God, that's so young. And I'm like, whoa. And then I told my friend I'm doing the Outdated Wrestling Podcast because I told her the story about how everything I do leads to me being old. And I'm like, guess what show I'm going to be on this week? The Outdated Wrestling Podcast. Everything that's old is new. She's like, oh, that'll get him. That'll get the girls going.
I honestly think that 65% of the success of this podcast is the title. The title made it. I came up with Outdated Hour instantly because believe it or not, I did a podcast for a year co-hosting and I got fired. And it lit a flame under my ass. And I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it better. Right. So I started this thing. And in the last 2 years, we have done it better. But it just outdated hour. And I said, I'll just stick wrestling in between. It just works. It caught my
attention and I like it. And I always enjoy your wordplay and your cleverness because to me, when it comes to being a writer or a copywriter or someone who's gonna put stuff out there for the people, why would you want to be a hack?
No, but you know what though? I am a hack.
No.
But I'll explain what hack means. Brian R. Solomon is a writer and journalist. Ian Douglas is an author. I'm a hack. I can churn out reams of quick, clean, good copy quickly and punchy headlines and great captions. There's always been a spot for that in writing. There's always been a spot for that in publishing. I was talking to Ian Douglas on a previous show. He says, you can do a book. And he insists I could do a book. And I'm like, I just don't have it in me. I'm not that type of, my mind doesn't even work long form. I'm short form.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Listen, I was in publishing from 1982 to 2021. I outlasted all of my contemporaries, all of them.
Right.
Still doing the same thing, still doing, a form of journalism. I did great. I have no complaints. I have a bookshelf full of awards and a lot of memories. Well, how did I fail? I did great.
So I wouldn't accuse you of failing. You've had a dream existence. And you've been a blues man, a wrestling editor, and everything else you've done. I mean,
you're the first person to bring up the blues career, and I appreciate it.
Oh, we got to talk about some blues, man.
Yeah, because I stepped in it, boy. I did really good. I did really good.
How does a white man? How old were you when you got into?
Oh shoot, I was in my late 30s, early 40s.
What?
You can do anything you want if you work it, man. But I was lucky enough to meet a lot of serious musicians. Thought I was a good singer. That was the key to all this. I was a singer, and I think that first there was a great session guitarist named Larry Mitchell produced my first album with another band, and then as I moved up the ranks, I had other producers, and I ended up working with Duke Robillard, who produced my Metropolitan Blue album. Yeah. Greatest single thing I've ever done is that album. It's called Metropolitan Blue. It's still out there in the digital realm. And,
I will check that out.
It's got all kinds of people on it. Tony Coleman from B.B. King's band. Everybody on it is an all-star cast behind me.
Oh my God.
Guys who played with Savoy Brown and just go on down the list. And I can't explain how lucky I got other than I really, really, just like with this podcast, when I get into something, I work it. Yeah. Day and night and day. I ain't stopping. Throw a boulder in front of the car. I'm going to push the boulder away and keep driving. That's what the music was like for me. We had a decent blues scene here in New York City with Chicago Blues and Manny's Car Wash. Within a year of playing those places, I was in the House of Blues radio hour with being interviewed by Dan Aykroyd. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know anything else other than I was a singer. Huh. And of course, my professional name was Robert Charels, of course. So it's just, I got lucky. And then through my wife, I got to know B.B. King, and he took a liking to me, and I performed with him on stage probably 12 times or something like that. So all told, was I rich and famous? No, but I played the Chicago Blues Festival twice. I got played on national radio with Dan Aykroyd I was able to jam with some great people like John Mayer, who looked at me as contemporaries. How did I mess up? I did great.
Of
I didn't,
course.
and I'm telling you right now, I didn't make a penny. I didn't make a dime. I didn't, but I had the
Right.
experience. I mean, I played the Chicago Blues Festival twice. I mean, again, the quality of the work means more to me than anything else. And I know it was good work, and that's all that I cared about.
Right.
And I could be kind of a tight ass hard ass in my musician days because I wanted to get it right. I wanted to be right.
No, I completely respect that.
And I was a band leader. I always drove the van, and we traveled all over the country. So for those of you listening, this is the first time I've ever really explained a music career on the wrestling podcast. But
well, good, because I wanted to hear about this.
It was. I worked with. I made a lot of friends. I don't know what to say other than age and financial need. I decided to get off the road around 2009. I just never went back. I just stopped cold. One of those.
You ever gig down in Florida, South Florida?
Yeah, all the time, man.
Where'd you play in South Florida?
We played the Treasure Coast Blues Festival 5 straight years.
Okay, that's a little far from me.
That was in Fort Pierce.
You ever play like Musicians Exchange, Fort Lauderdale?
We did Lauderdale
Echo
once,
Road.
but it wasn't that place. Tobacco Road I knew about, never played there. We played some clubs in and around the Vero Beach area. That's
north of me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm a big.
No, I was down in Florida 5 straight years. We went down there all the time.
You know the Reverend Billy C. Wirtz?
Sure.
That's a buddy of mine. Yeah, I haven't talked to him in years, but my friend did his album artwork. Joey Klucar, Reverend. I knew him back slightly after his wrestling days, so probably 90, 91. And he would tour. He'd play down here, and he was friends with Humperdinck. I was friends with Humperdinck, so we had a good rapport and everything.
Mm-hmm.
He just does barrel house and boogie woogie blues. My least favorite form of blues, if I may. That's neither here nor there. I'm not going to tell the blues man that 12-bar blues, boogie woogie blues, and 12-bar blues, and whatever other thing I just said are my least favorites. But
you know what? Here's my opinion of all music.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's 12-bar, boogie woogie, if it's funk, if it's polkas. If you mean it and you feel it, it's got soul. It doesn't matter the style. It doesn't matter the genre. If you're feeling it, other people are going to feel it too. And I think that's the key to music, I think.
You know what I really like in music? And I don't know why I like some blues guys and not other blues guys, or some rock guys and not other rock guys. But what I really like is a groove. And that's why I like Albert King, Sun Seals. If you listen
some of my favorites right there.
Holy shit. I want to talk to you about Sun Seals because big of a blues guy as I am, I've met very few of the greats. And I fucking met, that's just how cool he is, Sun Seals. I saw him many times. I saw him down here, and I saw him at B.B. King's Blues Club up in New York. Small, cool venue, right? That's the same one? Like really small, narrow?
I played there all the time.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure. He only had one place there, right?
Yeah, just one. Yeah, are you kidding?
Okay, so that's right, the one I went to. West Side, right?
No. He was right in Midtown.
But anyway, yeah, I was there. Jimmy Vivino was playing with Sun Seals at the time. And I think this was 2000-ish, because I was up there to see Jimmy Page and the Black Crowes at Roseland. Okay. And I went to see Sun Seals at B.B. King, because it was a feast of riches up there. It was a dog's banquet of entertainment. Like in South Florida, if you're not into salsa, that's it. So Sun Seals was one of my favorite blues guys, and I discovered him on an episode of Night Flight, approximately 1984, when I was going to college in Gainesville. Smoked a bowl, the announcer says, blah, 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 Chicago blues, and here's Sun Seals. And it was the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I got completely into him after that. And I met him at a club in Pompano, and I went up to him, I go, man, I'm your biggest fan. And he just couldn't have cared less, blew me off. But it was one of those things where, because of who he was, and I know he had a hard life and everything, I'm like, that's perfect. I had a little interaction with him, and that's it. And then by the time I saw him in New York, he was missing a leg, and his wife had shot him in the face. So then now he was really living the blues, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? Didn't add to the music that much. He could have stayed semi-miserable instead of being completely miserable, because I think that was a bridge too far.
The first time I saw Sun Seals was in the late 70s, and PBS had a music series called Soundstage,
Mm-hmm.
and it was centered around Elvin Bishop. But Elvin had two guests. One was Sun Seals, the other was Mighty Joe Young, because they were both playing the Chicago scene at that point. And I this first time I heard that buzzsaw that was Sun Seals guitar, man, and I'm telling you, nobody else like him.
Unique tone, unique way of playing. And I'm trying to think of what that song was because it turned me on to him so bad. It wasn't Buzzard Luck. It was sometime. Oh, people are gonna hate me for.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. It sounds like a song I covered when in my live act. We used to do a song of his called "Funky Bitch." That was the name of the song.
Check out Sun Seals, man, especially his first album.
Yeah.
I don't like when they bring the horns into. Are you a big fan of horns in the blues? You're into BB, so
if they're done right, yeah, I don't mind them. I don't mind them. It's like the same with harp players. There's great harp players, and some that just sound like bleeding cattle. You know.
Are you big on the harp?
I'm right down the middle on it. Like I said, depends on the player.
I mean, do you play?
No.
All right, so I feel free to say this. I fucking hate me some harmonica.
All right, that's
I didn't want to because I haven't heard all these stuff. I didn't know if you broke out the harmonica. But
no.
I goddamn cannot stand the harmonica. I don't care if it's Led Zeppelin playing it. I go past that part and I'm like, okay, nobody's fault but mine. I go through the third verse where it's the harmonica solo. I got right into Jimmy's solo at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Cannot abide by the harmonica.
Each to their own, man. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Blues.
No, it's cool. It's cool. For me, it's cool. Listen. I'm gonna be upset if somebody doesn't like harp. You know.
You know Michael Burks?
Yes.
Good guy. Smeezok to Jay with him down in Fort Lauderdale. Very nice guy. The new generation of the blues, and he seems to be like carrying on in the tradition.
Well, I used to jam. You talk about Jimmy Vivino. I used to jam with Jimmy at a club called Downtime in Manhattan for about. He had jams on, I think it was Tuesday nights, and I don't know how we got to know each other. We got to know each other. I was on stage with him a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And,
what era? What?
Oh, we're talking 80s, 90s.
Oh wow, yeah. Because he's like the blues guy of New York. He's like very prolific up there.
Oh yeah, he's one of the great players. You know something? People know him for being on Conan, and for other reasons. You should just listen to him sometime. I mean, he could play anything. He's one of those.
No, he was with Sun Seals when I saw him at BB's, and he was great, man. I was paying as much attention to him, man. So that's a real guitar player, yeah. And you can see even when they're coming out of commercial on Conan, like this guy's great.
You listen to any of the new blues, the new artists that are out there?
I don't really listen to any new music in any genre. I'd say a new band to me would be Stone Temple Pilots or Alice in Chains. And maybe The Obsessed if you want to go into the death.
No, I'm still into the earthy blues label stuff. I mean, my favorite performer right now is a singer harp player named John Nemeth, depending how you pronounce it. I wish I could sing like him. We'll put it that way.
Yeah,
he's like the new age Delbert McClinton, that kind of a guy. And he writes great songs. He's got a nice humorous edge to him. He's a great performer too. And I like, I'm still into my friend Duke Robillard, that smooth, smooth swinging guitar player. It's like, I like unpretentious music. I don't need all the frills and showbiz of current pop. I'd rather sit in a little club with 9 people and enjoy some music.
I've always been like, I'm just gritty and real. I don't like anything that's too much. Like my favorite kind of band is 4-piece. I like to hear what everybody's doing. I don't like 8 guitars and a wall of sound or dueling guitars. I don't like horns. I used to have a friend who was a keyboard player. He hated the fact that the only keyboard player I liked was John Lord.
You know something? I will state this. We better talk wrestling soon, but I will say this. I will say that John Lord was Deep Purple because I'll tell you why. When Richie Blackmore left and they replaced him with Tommy Bolin in the criminally underrated album called Come Taste the Band, it was still Deep Purple because they had John Lord. He was the key to their entire sound.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention Ian Pace, the drummer, too.
I'll concur with you on that. And was not that the case with Rainbow? Hence, Blackmore brought him over.
Right.
Yeah, those guys. And you know what's incredible? I just saw some kind of special about it, but all these guys, it was something about some psychologist was on and why people produce their seminal works in their 20s. And not just for music, but he's talking about science, mathematics,
Yeah.
etc. Newton, blah, blah, blah. And I've always wondered this, like I've been mad at Jimmy Page since the 80s. Like, okay, you did all that in the 70s and you can't come up with 3 good riffs since 1980? Come on. Oh, yeah.
Now here's where we part company, because I am firmly of the belief David Crosby
Yeah.
made some of the most riveting, exciting, and original music of his life right before he died.
Right. But
But
these are,
the
but these are
radio,
age
but
appropriate.
today's radio will not play music with someone as much as a single gray hair.
Oh yeah.
So
But I mean, listen, I was making inroads into the radio business in the mid 90s, and I said to the program director at Magic 102.7 Oldies, Florida, and I was in promotions and I was looking for a real job there. It was a glorified internship. And I'm like, why does everything on the radio suck? He goes, if you want to listen to music, bring a CD. This is just for the masses. It's garbage. We know it. It's McDonald's, period. So don't get caught up on radio play, because God knows what they play for music now makes the pop of the 90s and the 80s look like Mozart and Bach.
absolutely true.
If you stepped on a 4-year-old and recorded that, that would be your next Katy Perry song. But I hear such annoying things, and it's got to kill you as a musician, because I'm just an easily angered old man. You're an actual musician with training. And the stuff that I hear that purports to be music, come on, we are
Well,
at such a low point in our culture.
true.
Holy crap.
True, but I've always been my own little subculture.
Oh, me too.
While you all are, paying $1,700 to see Taylor Swift, I'm at home enjoying Elvin Bishop
Oh, brother.
and Sun Seals and BB King, and I can create my own world. I don't need to follow the masses. I don't need to turn a radio on.
Okay.
I know where to find the music I like. I know how to read. I know how to investigate. I know musicians. I can go. I'm definitely walking to the beat of my own drummer. It's easy.
You know what?
It is so. I am, for a guy who's done nothing but follow pop culture my whole life, I am so gleefully ignorant of today's pop culture completely. I could not name a Taylor Swift song.
Oh, preach it, sister. Come on.
I couldn't.
Now you got a brother from another mother, because now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
If anything is over with the mass public, I will avoid it like the plague. Sometimes to my discredit, because I'll wait until something is played out and I'll revisit it. Then I will make my mind up if it was good or if it was hype. I think the last thing I did that was mass consumption was I saw Jaws when I was about 9 years old. Haven't seen one Star Wars, haven't seen one comic book movie, haven't seen one popular movie, haven't seen a Julia Roberts movie, anything like that. But I could give you 1,000 things that are off the beaten path that'll blow your mind: music, video, TV, whatever. And people are not into that. They're like, don't harass people with your weird stuff. I'm like, this is great. This is art.
Listen. If you think Big Bang Theory is comedy, no, give me Stanley Tucci and the Imposters. That's comedy.
Oh,
all right.
Thank you.
I mean, come on.
We're part of a small club now, man, because geez, it's so all pervasive, and people will just accept shit in food, music, entertainment, you name it. And I'm like, I'm a prima donna because I like stuff to be good. And it's so few and far between, and people rave about everything.
Yeah, but I'm mellow about stuff though. Like I said, I know where to turn to. I know who to turn
yeah.
to. You know what I mean? It's like I don't begrudge the pop music scene. Everybody, listen, life is short. If you enjoy something fully, and if it's in your heart, go do it. Whatever it is. Freedom, just do what you like.
Right.
I just chose to go in a different direction. I've learned how to tune out all the noise. We'll put it that way.
You know what?
I think I'm a lot healthier for it. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, are you kidding, man? I came to that conclusion so long ago, I don't follow nothing. And
Right.
I've always picked, what's the fancy word? Procured. What's that thing when you're
You're a connoisseur of different flavors
yeah, like
than other people are.
I always knew what I liked, and I'm not just gonna listen to like, whatever. And everyone's very content for the status quo, and I've
Oh
never
yeah,
been
I listen. My taste has always been even when I was a kid. While everybody else was listening to Zeppelin and all that, I was listening to Dave Mason and Burton Cummings and the Guess
yeah.
Who. I mean, I always kind of veered away from hyped stuff. I
Oh
just
yeah.
and once you smell the phoniness behind hype,
Right.
you realize the music's usually pretty crummy too.
Right.
So you know what I mean? It's just common
And
sense.
and plus, especially with the blues,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can feel this is because, and maybe we'll even talk about some wrestling after this, but
Yeah, we better.
ah, wait, we can call this episode "Pain, Blues, and
No,
Agony."
listen,
But
listen. I've based my entire podcasting career over a musician named Dominic Triano, who turned down a gig with Steely Dan, who turned down a gig with Edgar Winter, who turned down a gig with who's the third one? Alice Cooper. Why? He wanted to do his own thing, and he didn't
mm,
mind. He didn't mind that he wasn't selling platinum albums. He was one of the greatest guitar players I have ever heard, but he wanted to do things his way.
mhm.
And I this is how I based my whole podcast career. Because I got to know his brother named Frank, who's a great guy. Met him on Facebook. I'm always screaming about Dominic Trano, his guitar player. The beauty part about Dominic was he was so respected by everybody around and knew how great a player he was. And I don't think it really mattered because he wasn't chasing that golden ring, whatever it is that,
Yeah,
that superstardom. He just wanted to make really damn good music, and he really
right.
did. So that's all I'm trying to do is do a damn good podcast. And
Yeah,
I'm going to do it my way. Since we just talked about music for 20 minutes, I think my people will stick with me. They'll be here. They'll listen to it.
I would think so. You're gonna have at least 12 new viewers after tonight. So so what?
Hey, listen. I want to know about. First of all, the little tiny bit of research I did about you. You have been a TV host, a commentator, right? Tell me when I'm wrong,
ev-
okay?
Everything. Yeah.
You worked in that promotion in the Bahamas.
Yeah. In 1983-84, my dad answered a little ad in the Miami Herald, as most great wrestling promotions start. And it happened to be from Tyree Pride and Bobby Wales. They're like, invest in a wrestling company. They were just shooting ducks in a barrel. They were just putting stuff out there, whatever. So I was already ringside photographer at that point in Miami. And my dad's like, I'm meeting these two guys. We're going to do a wrestling promotion. And it's like, it happened so quickly and bizarrely. I was 18, getting ready to go to Gainesville. So I wasn't even going to be here. And he's like, yeah, we're going to do a taping. So we got like hooked up with Malenko, Dr. Red Roberts, who was a compadre of Rusty Brooks. They were the forefront of the independent wrestling scene at the time. Malenko, Red, Rusty, all their students. No real names to speak of. Tyree, Bobby. We had a taping at some Kiwanis Club, Boys Club or something in Miami. Just shoestring budget, no real money involved. It was ridiculous. We had a banner. We had a thing built, a backdrop built, a set. Got an announcer from somewhere. Hooked up with Wild Bill Williams and Bev Shade. They were talent, but they also had their own promotions in Georgia and Florida previously. And we did a couple of tapings. It was, if I hadn't seen some of the stuff that I have seen, I would say it's the worst wrestling promotion ever. We put no effort into it, no thought into it. I was getting ready to go to college. My dad knew nothing about wrestling. He was a businessman. Tyree had drive, but wasn't really a businessman. Bobby had no drive and was not a businessman. And yet we did it, and it just happened. Like, oh, we're taping Malenko. Here's Malenko. It's like we did it. Now we have TV on Channel 39 WDZL. We have this ridiculous taping. Sweet Brown Sugar was there. Nobody thought to get an announcer, so there's me in a tracksuit with Pete Letterberg. Like, we looked like the two guys in the Martin Short, Harry Shearer, synchronized swimming. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
from
both got
SNL.
these
Yeah.
ridiculous tracksuits on, and like Tyree's like, hey, nobody got an announcer, so do it. And then I'm out there with Sweet Brown Sugar, who we paid $500 just to talk. And in 1984, that was a pretty good get. And he was pissed off to even be there because we had such a bad production, and he could tell, and nobody knew what they were doing. Nobody was in charge. And then I get out there and I had one line and I blew it in front of Sweet Brown Sugar. I go, "We're happy to have a Sweet Brown Sugar." And he looked at me like, God forbid anyone would say, "Hey, why don't you give it a second chance?" No, he launches right into his promo. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I had one word and I blew it." Afterwards, he cut a promo on the whole promotion. He goes, "You guys don't know how to do nothing. You guys don't know how to do a squash match, blah, blah, blah." And he left. And he was right. He was 1000% right. So then Louis Estea, one of the guys that we used as enhancement talent, even in our pathetic group, went back and told the NWA about it. So I waltz into the next matches at Miami Beach Convention Center when I was already a photographer. And Bill Alfonso comes up to me, who was a referee at that time. And he goes, "Bro, Duke is pissed at you. You ain't shooting tonight." And Duke is, of course, Duke Tanaka, Duke Kiyamoka, scary, dour promoter man that he was. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm done." Then Chris Dundee comes over. He's like, "You trying to make a fool out of me?" He's right out at Central Casting. Angelo Dundee's brother, Chris Dundee, who had been the promoter of record for Miami, like since the 50s or 60s, maybe, for boxing and wrestling. And that was the story with that. But we did go to the Bahamas many times. We eventually, Cyclone Negro became our booker, and he was going to bring in names which sound a little outdated now, no pun intended. But he was going to bring in Mighty Igor. I think maybe Ox Baker, Luke Graham, maybe. I don't quite remember. I have a list, and my dad was so into wrestling that he had a big list of names with the Sheik on it, Fabulous Moolah. I'm like, "What'd you do with that list of paper?" He's like, "Oh, threw it out." Great. That's not going to come in handy. Why not? We ended up breaking even, and the houses were not great, and the promotion was terrible. Nobody did anything right. I was in Gainesville. My dad only got into the promotion because of me, his son, who was a wrestling fan. And it didn't cost a lot of money. It's not like a Tony Khan situation where he's like, we were not spoiled. We're not rich. We're middle class. But my dad had a little better job than he had before in New Jersey. He moved up a little, and we had a little extra money to do this wrestling thing. Well, he wasn't cut out for the wrestling business because he's a respectable businessman, which disqualifies him right off the top. I was just an 18-year-old kid who knew nothing about the world. Here we go with Tyree and Bobby, who also knew nothing. And we ended up breaking even. We had Larry Sharp, Bob Orton Jr., the best of the local indie scene. We had Corporal Kirshner before he was a name, complete loon. His name was R.T. Reynolds. He looked like a hardcore biker back then. And he was a complete lunatic. Very scary guy. Bunch of guys like that. We went there a couple of times. I only made 2 out of the 4 to 5 trips that we did. We ended up breaking even, and my dad said, "The hell with it," because, we just, obviously somebody was taking it off the top, be it Tyree or the Charlie Thompson or whoever it was. So,
but breaking even is not as bad as it could have been. Yeah.
If you're going to be a money mark, because I told Ian Douglas he had a chapter about our promotion in his book about wrestling in the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said to him, he only used the first part of it. And I said, it was a typical money mark scenario in which blah, blah. But the second part that he didn't put in the book was, but it was so worth it because we didn't lose any money. And it was a great bonding experience for my dad and me, because he was a big wrestling fan too. So he kind of got to do the wrestling fantasy camp, as did I. And as money marks, we got off really easy because we really didn't lose money at it. And that's that.
No, I think that's awesome that you broke even. You did not lose. And you know what? You're probably looking back with fondness of that era too, aren't you?
Well, of course, because I got to do something with my dad that I never would have done, and he never would have done. And he was a fan from the old days, going to the matches in New Jersey at the old Laurel Gardens, boxing arenas and stuff.
Okay, I understand that you have done a little bit of podcasty stuff yourself, right? Weren't you on? Tell me what shows you've been on, what you've been up to in that regard.
It's a funny second act kind of scenario because if Brian Last and the 605 didn't come along in approximately 2017, last time you would have heard of Howard Baum was on the yellowed pages of an old wrestling magazine for men of a certain age. But everything that's old is new again. So Brian Last gave me a call and he's like, hey, I hear you're an entertaining chap. We're doing this podcast. At the time, I didn't know anything about podcasting. I had been out of the wrestling loop completely. But I was always a frustrated broadcaster, comedian, whatever you want to say. And as a matter of fact, on the last Brian Last thing that I taped, I go, thank you. You're always going to be the Porter Wagoner to my Dolly Parton. It would have existed without you. And you allowed me to unleash my inner Martin Short. And so I was on the 605, and it's a second life for all these guys that once did something, who are a little byline in an old magazine, who now we get to tell our story and flush out our whole careers in wrestling.
Are you still up to it? Are you still doing it?
That is up to Brian Last. We do have an episode in the can right now. He, of course, went on to way bigger and bigger things. The 605 is not officially dead, but by the looks of how over I am these days, for all intents and purposes, it may as well be. As Cornette would say, I'm not freshly over, hence you not really hearing of me in the last couple of years. But Brian claims that we're still going to do it. And as I told him in the last thing that we taped, I didn't realize it at the time. And I thought there's a million shows like this. But now looking at the landscape and seeing what was and what is, we clearly were, as I like to call it, the Howard Stern WOR TV show of the wrestling business. I defy anyone to come up with a more entertaining variety style package wrestling show. Interviewed name wrestlers, had ridiculous comedy, insightful commentary, and everything in between. It was a magazine style format, and a lot of people copy him in a lot of ways. A lot of people don't like him in a lot of ways. I am always going to be Team Brian, Team Arcadian Vanguard, and I think he was really an outrider and a genius in the way that he approached podcasting.
But I will say this, and I'm on a different network than Brian is now. I hooked up with the WrestleCopia podcast, but I will say this, and I don't think anybody in my sphere will begrudge me saying this. Arcadian Vanguard is a gold standard. It just is. It always has been. It probably always will be. It's the pace setter for everybody that's followed it. And hey, listen, good quality shows are good quality shows. Period. End of story. I think the world of Brian's talent. I like his. I don't know. Don't cross him. I like that about Brian. Yeah, it's like don't hit me with a bunch of garbage because it ain't gonna fly with him. So it's the shows that him and Cornette did about that legal snafu they did recently were some of the best podcasts I've ever heard.
You know, and Brian
that ad thing, yeah,
and he's become a really good host and foil for Cornette because he's a smart guy to begin with, and he's only gotten better and better. It's practice because I was almost good when we kind of stopped doing it. I was almost good because I'm a frustrated broadcaster, and I was almost good. I put a lot of pressure on myself to be like somebody who could think on the spot, a Conan, Solomon, Brian Solomon, a Letterman, somebody who has a Steve Martin, somebody who could say something so witty at the time and appropriate. And me, it's like 3 days later, I'm like, oh, I should have said that after he said Whipper Watson. That would have been so good. So I just wish I had like the quicker wit and all that. I appreciate all those guys. Back to the original thing. Brian is a very smart businessman, but he's also gotten really good on the air. He's an excellent historian. He's one of the few people who can wrangle Cornette in existence, right? The rise of Cornette kind of was like the end of me in the public eye, but it'll all work out. I got some plans.
Well, there you go. I mean,
I will see. I mean, whatever.
Hey, look, I got the Bums Row Sofa podcast, and the way I looked at it is that, hey, one door closes, another one opens, and
yeah,
it lit a fire under my butt, and I said, you know what? Go ahead, tell me to go away. In any event, it was a situation where I stopped being on that podcast, and my Facebook messages lit up, my emails lit up, going, "Where are you? Where'd you go?"
Yeah.
And I said, well, if I got this many people asking me, where did I go?
Yeah.
Do it yourself.
Right.
So within 5 days of the first podcast that I wasn't on, I had a podcast on the air.
Very good.
Just
Yeah.
like that. And I said, let's just run with this and see where we go with it.
Yeah.
And it's exceeded my shoot, man. There's 900 wrestling podcasts out there. The last 2 months I've been top 50, and the only thing I do to promote it is talk about it on social media. That's it. Podcasting, you're up against NBC sponsors podcasts, Spotify sponsors podcasts. Some of these, are from MSNBC. Whatever you're listening to, usually if it's in the top realm of podcasting, it's got sponsorships behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Wrestling has a few, and then we're up against the Steve Austins and the Bruce Pritchards and Jim Cornette, and everybody else is doing it.
Right.
So we're all fighting for a tiny slice of a pie that is even, it's already been eaten, really.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. Considering how little I promote it and just my stick-to-itiveness with this, I don't want to say this because it may not last, but we've been top 50 for 2 months.
Very good.
So if there's 900 podcasts and I'm in the top 50, okay, that's fine. And, I don't really care about the ratings. I know how many people are listening. I get the stats all the time.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that the stats are going up every time that I look at them. So it's like, again, I'm just doing this granularly. I'm just trying out the best show I can. Hope people enjoy it. If I'm enjoying it, I hope they do too. And I hope they enjoy this show. And I hope they enjoy your contribution to the show.
I hope you're prepared for a ratings dip this week, but hopefully things...
Nah, you kidding me? I will say this. I put out a show about 8 months ago that I was convinced was going to lay an egg the size of a Buick, right?
Yeah.
Just between you and me and everybody listening, I didn't think the show was that great. I just put one out and I said, I'll do this one. Okay. Hit 25 in the ratings, number 25.
Ooh.
I haven't been that high since.
Wow.
25. And I thought it was kind of a thrown off, just a couple guys talking type of thing, which only goes to show you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. Podcasting is like grabbing for smoke. You're never going to catch it. You think you know what you're doing, but you really don't.
I would just like to think, not to cut you off, that there is some kind of a perfect algorithm out there to really figure out what the people want and to give it to them. And I don't quite know what that algorithm is. I think 605 came close.
Yeah.
Or fulfilled it, actually.
Well, he's got some other good podcasts too. He's got that.
Yeah, for sure.
Stick to Wrestling is a great podcast with the John McAdams, Steve Jenner. I love those guys, and they do a great job looking back. They're real specific, timeline specific, which I don't do.
Yeah.
But these guys are like way more historically oriented than I am, and they get down into the nitty gritty of a certain period, and it's really entertaining because they've got good banter. And I don't know. I don't know about you, Howard. I think a good podcast is just two people talking, and you feel like you're listening in on them.
Yeah, yeah. If they have something good to say, I mean,
well, there's the thing. I've been enamored with podcasts. I'm sitting there listening, like I try a podcast, and then I realize I'm getting into the conversation or the subject matter, and then I even forget who the second guy is or the other woman maybe that's talking. All I know is I'm being entertained. And I stick through it to the end because it was a good conversation.
Well, hey, let me ask you this: what is your favorite Martin Short character? Apropos,
Martin Short character. God, he's funny. You know what? My favorite Martin Short character is Martin Short, Mr. Showbiz. When he comes out, oh, thank you, everybody. He's that smarmy thing he does kills me every time. I saw his Broadway show too when he did that.
Did you? Yeah.
It was a review. It wasn't a show. And it wasn't a one-man thing. He had a cast, but it was almost like an SCTV episode.
I can be in the worst. Somebody close to me could die that day, but if I happen to see Jackie Rogers Jr., I will laugh no matter what.
Jackie Rogers is great.
You could have just told me that I have an inoperable brain tumor. I don't care. I see Jackie Rogers, and he's like with a mocha swell of hatred if you have it. I just.
All right, now you're jogging my mind. Irving Cohen?
Oh, Irving Cohen. That's my favorite.
Oh, that's give me favorite. A C. About C.
Once they had a they had a banquet for him, Irving Cohen's 93rd birthday, and he comes out, this huge crowd of people, And they're like, Martina Navratilova, the guy from Planet of the Apes, Charlton Heston, and everyone, all these big stars are there. Irving Cohen comes out and he's mic'd up, and they put the mic on him, and he has his young wife with him, and he takes the cigar out of his mouth. A huge crowd of people in a banquet room, and he goes, "Who the hell do you have to stoop to get a pan of butter around here?" Oh, he just kills me. One time he was on the Louis B. Williams show. It was John Candy. Willie B. Williams show with John Candy after Willie B. Williams broke away from Sammy Maudlin.
Right,
so
right.
Willie B. Williams is trying to do his own show, and he has Irving Cohen on. And they have this little stage on, and they're playing Irving Cohen on to this music, like da 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 da. And Irving Cohen is going so slow that they had to restart the entrance music and everything. And he's having trouble getting up the step. And John Candy just threw him in the chair. He's like, enough already. And he goes, Willie B., it takes a lot of guts to leave a successful show like you did. And John Candy's all happy. And he goes, you did the wrong thing. You're never going to succeed on your own. Those are my top two. Jackie
Also, wait a minute. Nathan Thurm?
Yeah, everyone likes that one. That's never, because that's like a one note character.
I know it's one note, but it's a good note, though. It's a good note.
Yeah. You always get to say
wait a minute, Howard. That's not what I'm saying. You're saying it, right? It's just that over and over again.
It's so funny. And you know the story behind that. One of his makeup ladies was Nathan Thurm. She was always so defensive that whatever you said to her, and my aunt does the same thing. She goes, it's so funny you think I don't know that. Why would you think I don't know that? So after she made him up once and he did the skit, somebody says, you know that's you, right? And then Martin Short felt so bad about it because like that was the big secret.
Comedy gold is comedy gold.
And
got to get your inspiration from somewhere.
Jiminy Glick, which is like ultra hilarious, one of his later life characters.
Mm-hmm.
He's based on Skippy Lowe. If anybody looks up Skippy Lowe, who was an entertainment reporter back in the day, it's totally Skippy Lowe, but Martin Short will not admit that. He just says, oh, I lived on a street with a guy with a really weird voice like that. It went really low, and then when he go really high.
When he goes low, he sounds just like the Grand Wizard.
Yeah.
Remember the Grand Wizard?
Yeah, I never put them together.
I'm telling you, McMahon, I'm going to. Right?
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Right? I thought he was channeling the Grand Wizard when he goes low. I don't think, but then I'm going to do. It's like I always thought it was an homage to the Grand Wizard. I swear to you.
Yeah. Wow. I've never heard him really cross-reference any wrestling, so I'd be a little.
No, he's never even come close to
that. Yeah. SCTV did do a skit called The Young and the Wrestling once.
Yes, they did. With Tony Rosado and Andrea Martin and Rick Moranis. Yes.
Yes. Man.
Hilarious. Just 5 seconds.
Of my life.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love SCTV. That's a huge fan.
Oh,
every variation of it. You know what? I got to ask you something here on the Outdated Wrestling Hour.
Yeah, please.
Do you watch any of today's stuff?
Well, I was hoping we would get to this. No. Emphatically no, and I wouldn't even know one name. There was a time where I would have certain linchpins, certain connections to the business, but over the years that has gone away to such a degree that it all looks like one just big generic indie show to me, and I am done as done can be. There's not a wrestling thing that they can have that I'm ever going to tune into again. I have zero interest.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're even more strident than I am. I'm just particular in my old age. I'll watch a couple of things, but anything, and it's all WWE. Everything else just looks like amateur hour. I'm sorry. I can't. And the things, I don't like deathmatch wrestling. I don't like gratuitous maneuvers, which are risky. Yeah. I just think it's, you're supposed to work your opponent, not hurt him for real. That's why it's called a work. So it's like, I'm not into it. And today's wrestling fan does not have the mindset of the wrestling fan when I was a child. When I was a child, you bought your ticket to see the bad guy lose and your favorite win. Now everybody's booking along with the promoters. Everybody's saying this guy's not getting pushed right, or you killed his career because he took one pinfall. They have flung the door open far too wide, and everybody's an expert. And then, therefore, no one is an expert.
Thank you for bringing up so many points that should be obvious to anybody who has been around the wrestling business in any capacity. There is an AEW WWE culture war going on right now. I don't have a dog in any fight. I don't care. Anything Jim Cornette has ever said, I'm in lockstep with him because it just happens to be that way. I do not follow anyone ever. I go against people, but Cornette has never uttered a peep that I don't agree with. And forget that. I'm not into the AEW versus WWE war. I am pro wrestling, and I haven't seen pro wrestling since the 80s, maybe. And there are flashes of it. And by the way, I love DCW. And this is what blurs the line between wild high spot and just gratuitous violence and nonsense with no psychology. So here's the thing. I was paying no attention to professional wrestling. A couple of friends invited me to some local indie shows, the best indie shows in the area, supposedly from Florida, plus some other stuff I've seen, plus, of course, AEW. And what wrestling has done has consistently and to a further extent bastardized and cannibalized itself ever since kayfabe died. Now they've gone so far that they can never go back, and they have eaten the very thing that they need to survive on. Because they, as Jack Briscoe once said, believability and credibility is the coin of the realm. And in those days, yes, I might have been bored as a 10-year-old kid when Jerry Briscoe was in a 10-minute arm lock waiting to make the hot tag onto Jack against the two spoilers or Rupert Orton. But, that was wrestling. That was wrestling, and there were things that could have been better. There could have been more action in the old days. As a kid, I was mad that there wasn't more action. I was mad that Dusty Rhodes could say to King Curtis, "You almost took my eye out. I'm going to decapitate you." Then they would do some wrestling thing, and it would be like business as usual. Like, this guy just took his eye out on TV, and he didn't even do anything to him, and now he's disqualified, and they're going to fight next week. Like, what? I wanted to see somebody die. Like, and by the way, as far as
oh, well, I'll tell you what, you should have lived in a small town like I did when they would have a huge to-do on television, like, a big, horrible, bloody scene where Chief Jay Strongbow was always getting cut open, screaming on the mat. Oh, my God. He would just go nuts. He would go mental. And it's coming. What? The match Blassie against Strongbow is coming to the Washington Avenue Armory? I got to be there. Here's my $4. And then you see the match, it lasts 4 minutes and 50 seconds, and one guy gets counted out.
And they play around, and it's a bunch of bullshit. And I'm like, oh, what the hell? Like,
right.
What?
I used to hate. That's the trouble with small town stuff. I always got the feeling that they didn't work as hard in the B shows than they did in the A shows.
I'm talking Florida, Miami Beach Convention Center, because Gordon Solie would say, big angle. And Gordon Solie would go, "I've known the dream for many a year, and Gary Hart, look out." And then nothing would happen. It would be a disqualification or whatever. Like,
right, yeah.
One thing where we differ, as a wrestling fan from my earliest days, I've been a fan of the heel. So I wanted to see Dusty Rhodes laying. I wanted to see all the good guys laying. I always got mad because the bad guy had to be the chicken shit and the loser. And I'm like, come on, man, that's Superstar Graham. What's he laying down for Dusty Rhodes for? That's Superstar Graham.
I am not and never will be mainstream. You know what my favorite wrestler was growing up? Baron Mikel Cicluna.
Yeah.
Baron Mikel, he was nobody's favorite wrestler. Not even the heel fans liked him. I just liked him because it was around 75 when I went to the very same armory and he sneered at people and there was almost a riot. I said, boy, this guy's got what it takes.
Yeah.
Something inside of me said he's got the psychology. Even then I'm thinking, he knows what he's doing. He's getting these people mad. He's just looking at them.
Right. Look at somebody like Blassie when he came out. Like, just that look on his face. And he looked like my Nana, but you could just tell, like, the disgust he had for the fans. And he's like,
Oh, that Blassie was just champion of psychology.
God.
He just, and you know what? By the time he came back 72, 73, right before he 70, maybe a little bit 74, his knees were shot. He was very old. He was out of shape. And he still terrified everybody. He just had that psychology going. Well, and that's when you got it, man. Those are the stars nobody forgets.
One of the things I want to ask you old style magazine guys about and everything is that seamlessly it went to we're covering Leo Garibaldi and the Fullers and the Kojaks, whatever.
Kozak, Nick Kozak.
Right. We're doing all the old names. Wrestling is wrestling. All of a sudden, 1985 happens, and the wrestling magazines have to start putting over all this crazy shit that is not wrestling. And all the editors at the time have to do this like, this isn't really wrestling, but this is our business. And that part of it I understand. But what I don't understand is how the old school wrestling people, like an Apter, Napolitano, they didn't miss a beat professionally, and you can't, of course. It's like, oh, wrestling sucks now, I'm not going to stop the magazine. But to go along with it as a fan, and to hear a Bill Apter say, oh, Sting's a great wrestler. I'm the same guy who said Jack Briscoe is a great wrestler, and I liked Mil Mascaris and Superstar Graham. But now I'm putting over Sting and the whole wrestling world in general. Like when I go to the CAC, the Cauliflower, they consider the new crop, the guys that came in after the old territory system, wrestlers, and I don't. And I always wondered how the old school guys could just so easily go along with this new WWE inspired, this is wrestling now. It's all cartoony and bullshit, and it's not a professional beef, it's a personal beef I have with them. Like, why? How can you be entertained by Sting against Flair if you've seen Funk and Briscoe?
Boy, you're a harder grader than I am. I thought I was a hard grader. No,
that's high praise. That's high praise.
You're a harder grader than I am, because it's like, as long as the matches continue to have at least a whiff of the suspension of disbelief, something that you could hang your head on, it looked like a fight.
Right.
It didn't offend me. It was only until things got so out there and so goofy around the time Glow was on the air and that whole Saturday morning phase of pro wrestling where it was like
right,
constant shouting. McMahon went from being a normal announcer into a brain carny, just he's gonna hit him, it got to be so much of a cartoon. I think the old timers, the ones who were still left in that era, went along with it because they didn't want to kill the golden goose, to be honest with you. And let me tell you something too. Around 84, you gotta have to ask Craig Peters, since I had him on the show. Craig insists that during the height of that hot wrestling period in the early 80s, that only on the newsstand, not in subscription form, but there was a short period of time where Pro Wrestling Illustrated outsold Sports Illustrated on the newsstand.
No way.
Swear to God. It's verifiable. So people were riding that train. I can't say I blame them.
Yeah.
It's almost to the point where things are moving so fast and things are going so well that you forget that you left your good suit at home. You know what I'm saying?
People like Meltzer in the magazines and whatever media, they're going to go with what's on, obviously. But I mean, just as a professional, Apter used to be a fan. My God, how many times have I mentioned Apter in this thing? But it's on my mind. I just can't believe a guy like that, who was around from the earliest days of WWF, and God knows what before then, probably saw Milo of Croton live in person a few times. But how do you all of a sudden accept Sting, Luger, these guys? I mean, personally.
But I still know him, and I still contribute to something he does online. He likes today's stuff just as well.
That's what I don't get.
Well, but you know what? It's been his life, his whole life.
Yeah.
And he's getting up there. He's probably in his 80s now. And I love the guy. He's a tremendous human being. And he just enjoys it as much now as he ever has.
Right.
You know what? It's like, how do I equate this? If you met somebody and you're 20 years old and you go to the park together every Sunday and you look at the kids play and you look at the birds and, you hear the calliope playing in the background, and you do it every Sunday, and soon you're 80 and you're still at the park. Basically, that's really, if you love something, you love even the crust of it. And I think that you don't want to give it up, even if it isn't quite what it used to be. It's still what it was. It's still called what it was. You know what I'm saying? It's like, once it's in your blood, you can't really get rid of it.
No, I could see that.
You know what I'm saying? In other words, some people, listen, I know some people that love some things so much that I don't know what they would do without those things.
Yeah.
I know, there's wrestling fans who act like that.
Yeah.
Oh, if wrestling wasn't on, what would I do?
Right.
Those are the ones walking around with the championship belts over their shoulder.
Right.
But you
Well,
know what
these
I'm
people,
saying, though.
right. Right.
You know what I'm saying. It becomes part of who we are. Now
But
that could be taken to unhealthy extremes, but by the same token, if you ain't hurting nobody and it's what you like, have at it,
more
man.
power to
Have
you. But
at it.
I just mean, okay, if I was a strict boxing fan, raised on Hagler and Leonard, and all of a sudden now they come in with clown outfits and they have WWE skits in between, I'd be like, all right, maybe it's time to get a new hobby. These new guys suck. They don't have the same grit and fortitude that the old guys had. And I mean, with wrestling, and a lot of the fans, and I think what you just said regarding the professional people, I think it has a lot more. I think that's even more applicable toward the fans because my God, I don't know what they could get, what they could come up with that you wouldn't watch. I haven't seen WWE in 20 years. I tried with AEW, and what hurts the whole thing is the lack of kayfabe. I'll just squeeze in one of my little talking points, which is when you had kayfabe, anything was palatable. I don't care if you're Bugsy McGraw, Jimmy Valiant. Well, it's kayfabe. Even if you look stupid, even if this is a clown match, the next match is going to be something a little more real, and you're going to be back in the world of wrestling. Under the auspices, Gordon, there was so much dumb stuff, but if you had Gordon Solie or Lance Russell taking it seriously, today's stuff has no leg to stand on. My friend likes to watch the aforementioned Big Bang Theory, if you could even imagine. I leave the room when this happens, but the lead into that show is AEW. And she goes, "You should be so embarrassed." I go, "I know, but why?" She goes, "I just saw the end of your stupid wrestling program, and it was the dumbest thing I've ever seen." I'm like, "I know. I cannot accept any responsibility, and that is not my wrestling, so don't confuse me with that, okay?" And that's just what's sad because now, I mean, there was that skit about that girl who came out holding the thing up to the other girl's throat and she couldn't move back.
Oh no, that spot, yeah, where she easily could have just went like pushed her hand forward. It's all over, but no,
And
she kind of leaned into it. I saw that clip and I'm like,
the,
are you even trying, guys?
the
Jeez.
overacting and
Yeah.
I mean, I like that the Tori girl who's from the past, Tony Storm.
Right.
Okay, fine. And as much as I hate WWE, they know what they're doing. I'm now forced to admit and say that. Okay.
Here's the deal. A lot of it's not my cup of tea. It's certainly not your cup of tea. And this does not justify it artistically, but they sell out football stadiums 2 nights in a row. They have never been more successful than they are as you and I speak right now. And this includes WrestleMania 3, all those great moments from the past. They have never been more cohesive in terms of their business. It's firing on all cylinders. Scandal after scandal in the 80s and 90s, it all rolled off their backs and they're still doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say other than talk to a young wrestling fan, and they're as fanatical about it as I was when I was 12 years old. So I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Listen, the reason young people can't look at it the way you and I did is because they'll never see what we're talking about.
Right.
They'll never have access to it. And it's as if we're talking about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington.
Oh my God.
It's right. I mean, it's that old stuff. I'll never see that.
Here's the thing. I've always been a fan of the heels, and I don't care that much about the baby faces, even if they're historical figures. And I met Luthez. I had ample opportunity to take a picture with him. And I told Brian Solomon, it's like taking a picture with Abe Lincoln. Like, it's like so before me. I don't even care. Now, Blassie, of course, which I did get a picture with and climbed over everyone at the table to get. Yeah, I'm into my people, but certain historical figures, and I get it. Terry Funk is going to be that way in 10 years. He's going to be a footnote and a picture in a book. And we all know what he is and what he did night in, night out for 50 years and everything that he represents.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to end up an old dusty name like everybody else. And no one's ever going to know what he did. And that is sad.
Well, it's the passage of time, but there is one saving grace, my friend, and you're on it. I'm never going to forget Terry Funk. I'm never going to forget Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe, Nick Kozak. I just go down the list of people we've talked about. we talk about Baron Mikhail Cicluna, Johnny
We won't
Rods. Just
okay,
keep
we
going.
won't forget it, but it's like describing blue to a blind person because I can't sit any human being down and tell them how amazing superstar Billy Graham looked when he came out in the building or how crazy Terry Funk was. All they have to go on is their own mind, their own references, and nothing in their lifetime could prepare them for that.
Right.
You know? Because same thing about going to a concert in the 70s and 80s. Try and tell anybody under 30 how cool David Lee Roth was in 1982, right?
Right.
I mean, we're here for us.
I mean, the problem is I can't argue with you. Your points are very well taken. The trouble is I don't want to dwell on the negativity when there's so many good vibes I could get from reminiscing that I say let them have theirs because I got mine. I got mine. So, it's like I'm happy I saw what I saw. I still kind of watch WWE, like I say, with one eye. I've got one eye on them all the time. I can't look at AEW because it goes against everything I ever thought about wrestling. It's just, I can't look at it. I don't even bother. Why is Jim Ross or Tony Schiavone's involved with it? You're going to have to ask them because I can't figure it out. Do you have?
Well, one of them was working at Starbucks, so I think I have the answer to that.
I don't know, man. I just don't know. You can't let it go that far. I mean, and I'm sure they do a couple of good things on AEW once in a while. I'm sure there's an athletic match that's 7 minutes long that probably look like a wrestling match in there somewhere. But I don't want to work that hard to find the raisin in my surprise ball, so to speak. I hope you get that reference. We'll find out.
Let that just go to show you how good WWF is at what they do. And I even have to say that under my breath, okay?
Yeah.
Because I don't like it, but goddamn, they do it right. Yeah, AEW.
But you say you haven't looked at WWE lately, right? Have you seen some of
seen it by osmosis?
But here's the thing: if you watch a show now and you watch the beginning of the show, it looks like you're watching a prequel to a football game or NBA game. Here comes your wrestlers out of character, walking from their cars into the arena just like they would show LeBron James or a member of the New York Giants before he goes in. And then there is this amazing camera angle they do now of somebody walking through the building, through the corridor, through the gorilla position, out into the gate and out. The camera follows him from behind out into the crowd. It looks like a sport.
Right.
I mean, it really looks like a sport. And I kind of like that. I think visually they're doing some real creative things. I think that may have to do with the TKO merger. The fact you got two companies behind it. One maybe offering them advice on how to make it look a little more professional. I think it's working like gangbusters. But then they bring out horror monster characters, that look like Halloween. Right. And I just want to throw my New Balance at my my LOED.
And but all these kids are into their cosplay and their irony and their cuteness, and everybody has cannibalized whatever has gone before this generation, so they could just eat it, make fun of it, treat it ironically, make it into a meme. If King Curtis came out today, and this touches upon something that you said before, everybody is an armchair booker now and everything. In 1976, Gordon Solie would say, somebody just took somebody's eye out. Let's see what happens next week. And you'd be waiting all week and couldn't wait and tune it in. And Dusty Rhodes would have his eye thing covered and be like, oh, Wednesday night, I'm going to kill you. Back then it was, what's going to happen with the King Curtis, Gary Hart, Dusty Rhodes saga? Today, it's, I think King Curtis's agent should have demanded a little more because he didn't perform that well in the mid-car matches against Steve Keirn building up to the Dusty feud. Nobody wants to be surprised. Everybody wants to be an insider. That was not wrestling. It was the whole thing was a cliffhanger to next week. You're not supposed to get on there and say, what do you think they're going to do? Is Tammy going to be with him? Is she going to leave the promotion? Is this a work? The internet killed wrestling for that very reason right there.
Yep.
And another thing that killed wrestling was this laissez-faire attitude toward kayfabe in the late 90s. And believe it or not, one of the biggest proponents of that I heard from the horse's mouth was Gordon Solie himself. We're at the NWA 50th, and we're talking about how wrestling is bigger than ever. And Gordon said, yeah, because everyone's in on it now. I think it's great. And I said, really? Yeah, it brings a whole new a whole new attention to it, whatever. It's a whole new reason to get involved because now they're smart to it. And I'm like, you, Gordon Soley, of all people, are for this. And he's like, yeah. And another person who didn't care was Pat Patterson. Of course, he was one of the masterminds. He was McMahon's Goebbels, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this big conversation about Pat. I mean, with Pat, I met him on the street in Hollywood, Florida. Had a big, long drinking session. I asked him a lot of old school stuff, not really anything McMahon related, because I didn't really care anything about that.
Yeah.
Plus, I knew he was a McMahon apologist and everything. And what am I going to get out of that? So I asked him mainly about the territories and stuff. But when I did ask him about McMahon, I said, you're an old school guy. You protected kayfabe all that time. You don't care about all this tomfoolery? He's like, no, I think it's great. And there you go. I mean, what more of an authority do you want than that?
Yeah, I know, right? I may consider myself a little different than a lot of wrestling writers, and I had more fun talking to Gordon Soley, Eric Embry, guys backstage, guys who were involved with the creative, than I got my picture taken with Rufus R. Jones over there. Do you know what I mean? It's like I wanted to know how to build a card, how to build an organization, what makes a good card, what makes a pay-per-view, what makes a main eventer, how to pace a card. Why is he in the main event? All those kind of things.
Right.
And the schematic of putting a wrestling show together. That's what fascinated me.
Yeah.
I was not there. Hey, I drove one of Demolition to the hotel. I wasn't that guy. Right. Some of the others hang around, the other journalists. Oh, I met so and so. No.
Yeah.
That's not what I was there. I was there to kind of first of all, I consider myself more of a reporter than anything else, go back with the results. But secondly, I wanted to learn from the real seasoned guys what made it work, how it worked.
Mm.
I learned a lot, but everything I learned doesn't apply today. None of it.
Yeah. That's the problem because
right.
I mean,
right.
how long ago did it start that guys that are involved in feuds the very next day, even if it was a nail board, death wire, explosive, double juice double shave your head match, the next day, hey, Kevin O'Reilly, pleasure to work with you, man. Can't wait to get together next month for SummerSlam. Like, what? You just destroyed your own personality, your own character, your own believability, the promotion you work for, any promotion you may work for. That's in the old days. Now, none of it matters.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
there's another point too. Everybody says AEW, oh, Tony Khan, he needs to get a booker. He needs to get a booker. He needs a veteran booker. I put it to you. Who's that? They're all gone. Kevin Sullivan's not around anymore. Jim Cornette doesn't have anything to do with the business.
Right.
Who's this booker? Who's this mythical booker you're talking about? Seriously.
Yeah.
All the old school Jerry Jarrett's dead. Well, who are they thinking is going to come rescue and put the flavor of wrestling into AEW when there's nobody left?
Yeah.
To do it.
And guess what? If those guys were there, the kids today, if I may be so bold, don't know what the fuck wrestling ever was, and they don't know what they're doing. They just want to be cute in their outfits while they're young and hot, do bad acting and learn spots and everything. But everyone's so interchangeable. It's just not wrestling to me because everybody used to be like such a different character. Now it's like every guy has the same male stripper outfit. Every girl has the same female stripper outfit. Like the circus, those things with the butt cheek holder uppers, whatever they are, whatever,
I don't know. I think it's changed a lot since the Attitude Era when the female wrestlers were like a girly show. Now I have to play devil's advocate in that they're attractive, yes, and they dress pretty hot, but they're athletic. They're presented as athletes. The only healthy thing that happened to wrestling in the last 30 years is the equalization of the female wrestler and the male wrestler. They're promoted on an even keel. They both main event, and each one sells tickets. And it wasn't that way 30 years ago.
No, I concur wholeheartedly. I always said as a joke, I prefer the day when female wrestlers looked like truck drivers in a one-piece bathing suit. But now I'm friends with Leilani Kai on the internet, so I really can't say that one anymore. But notwithstanding, yes, what had happened was in between the old days and the new days of women's wrestling was in the 60s and 70s, you had your truck driver looking gals in their one pieces and everything. Then the pendulum struck all the way in the other way where they were hot, the whole diva period where they were hot, but they couldn't wrestle. Now they're extremely hot and they can wrestle at least as good as the guys. I don't really call it wrestling. I've never been a big advocate of female wrestling because I think the ring is not made for them. So that it's a built-in flaw to begin with, because you whip a girl into the ropes, they have to do that little hop. They have to do that little hop move, right? So if you're in a bar fight and somebody's taking you to the far rope and you're going to throw the guy, you're going to do a little hop to make sure they can get a good, throw on you. And the ropes are not in the right spot, so they have to hit them all gingerly, and it doesn't look right. They need to have their own ring or style or something.
I'm okay with it. Let's leave it at this. Craig Peters used to sit across from me at the Peterborough offices, and he would always complain, well, if they follow the rule, there really was an NWA rule book, by the way.
Yeah,
you can hold it in your hand. You can literally hold it in your hand. And you go, he should have been disqualified 2 minutes into that match. And in this other match, he should have been disqualified at the 4 minute. I said, wait a minute. It's a pay-per-view. And every match is going to last within 1.5 to 7 minutes because somebody's getting DQ'd because they went by the rule book. Right. Nobody cares about the rule book.
Right.
First of all. Secondly, it's the organized mayhem that has always put wrestling aside, whether you think it's, fake, real looking, whatever. It's the fact that it's out of the norm. It's not a boxing match. They're both in similar rings, but one is strictly rules inherent. The other is loose, and you never know what's going to happen.
Well,
and the violence has changed from somebody pulling a screwdriver out of their trunks to jumping off the top rope onto the arena floor. I mean, I think the appeal of the whole thing is that it's not the usual thing you would see.
Yeah. Well, one of my always big quotes about wrestling was, wrestling is sports with all the boring stuff edited out.
Right. Yeah. It just goes right to it. Now, you and I would rather watch Harley Race versus Terry Funk than everything that's on today. I know that's true. I think I'm not speaking for you, but I think you would agree with that.
Goes without saying.
But here's the deal. As I age and I'm getting a little more mellow and a little more wistful, I'm just in my odd kind of a way, even though I'm not the biggest fan of today's stuff. I'm glad it's still around. I'm glad people are still enjoying it. There is such a thing as professional wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, AI hasn't taken it over yet. It's like
coming.
There could, it's coming. It's coming for me and you too. So that's the problem.
Hey,
but,
it was. I'm almost done anyway.
Yeah.
I don't have much left in the tank anyway. They can have it.
But my end point is just this. I'm glad it's still here. I'm glad I can look at it with one eye, and I'm glad I still have the memory I have to look back at all the stuff we just
done. In a way, but in a way I wish it had died. And then you could refer to it as something that you were a part of that has gone the way of the circus freak show. Something that no one will ever see again, like Grand Guignol. I never knew how to pronounce that. Grand Guignol? You're the writer.
I don't know how to pronounce it either. I know how to spell it. I can't pronounce it.
I know. I never actually said it. I know what it is.
Yeah.
I know what it is, and I love it, and I can't say it.
Right.
So easy when you know the languages, Martin. But what attracted me to wrestling was a Grand Guignol maybe of it, which is in France they would have these real life theaters that were grotesque. It was the theater of the grotesque, literally Grand Guignol. Somebody pronounce it right out there for me, please. And what they would do is have these grotesque kind of anthology series. It was the runner-up to maybe Tales from the Crypt or something. They would enact these stories on stage in France, and it would be very bloody and gory. Now, as a child, I liked the monster movies, the Hammer movies, Godzilla, blood, anything that was freaky, the Grand Guignol, and of course, that led me right to wrestling. And when I saw my first Angle in 1974, I was hooked. Now, I say to myself, if I was a 10-year-old kid, is there anything for me to latch onto as the counterculture, underground weirdo that I was? And I have to say, speaking for 10-year-old me, no way. I wouldn't have been into Seth Rollins, nobody. Undertaker's fake gimmick. You want wrestling to be real, but he comes back from the dead. They put pyro in the things, but he controls them. Come on.
Yeah. No, I'm of the very unpopular opinion that he was the most damaging thing. The Undertaker character was the most damaging thing ever to happen.
Thank you. I couldn't believe they were doing that.
To mainstream, because they came right out and said, folks, enjoy the fake.
Right. Thank you.
There's no way this is real. You know it's not real. Here it is.
In your face.
And listen, he's a great wrestler.
Yeah.
Great in the ring. When they turned him into the American Badass and he was riding a motorcycle, I said, finally, they grew up.
Yeah.
And then they brought it back to the other way it was. But in any event, no, it's just damaging. It's damaging. How can I take your championship series when I just saw a guy rise through the air and go to heaven?
Right.
Or get buried alive, or whatever the corny gimmick is.
Or like, don't sell and just sit up. Oh, it's not enough to be a big guy like Hawk. Like, don't sell the pile driver. You're a wrestler. Don't sell the pile driver. And like, don't ever die. That you're the Undertaker. Now you're a joke. But guess what? They love it. I have so many friends that eat it up, whatever they've been doing the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, that sigh can only mean one thing, folks.
The sigh means we're out of time. We're out of time. I'm out of time. But this has been Howard Baum. Man, a pleasure actually meeting you. This is, folks, the first time we've ever talked. So we're going to have to ask you to come back. I think you have a feet more things to say. I could be wrong. But
I thought it might go well. And please, I'm sorry if I get overly excitable. I've been accused of being loud and obnoxious. I hope I'm not. There's nothing I can do to control myself or attenuate myself. So I hope I've acquitted myself okay. That's what the volume adjustments are for.
Well, listen, congratulations for having a career in wrestling, and you survived it like I did. And I hope life is good for you. And we'll talk again. How's that sound?
And by the way, let me just say to all the people out there, feel free to contact me, friend me on the Facebook, Howard Baum. You can also check out some of my glorious wrestling photography, also on Facebook at Hard Way Art. And you can friend me there. You can communicate with me. A lot of exciting doings. And Bob, certainly a long time in coming. Even though we were completely almost non-aware of each other for 30 years, I feel like I have a kindred spirit now. And I look forward to continued success for everyone involved. And thank you again. As always, it is a total honor.
Yes, and same for me. And I like I said, I looked you up. I did a little research, and you've done a lot of stuff. I mean, it's like I just want to see what's next. I have a feeling you got one more act. You have another act.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Somebody with money out there, please hit those, smash those numbers. Do whatever you kids do today. Papa needs a payday.
You got me with that. Whatever you kids do today, just do it.
Right, it's got to be a strong finish.
That's right. Yeah. Give me a C, a bouncy C. Ladies and gentlemen, Howard Baum.
That was great. Hope it was good.
It was good. Man, as I record these goodbyes, it is raining so hard in my usual studio that I can't get the sound out of my headphones. I'm hoping this, like Brian last, I hope this doesn't end up on the recording because it is pouring out there. It's a Thursday night as I record this. It is really coming down in buckets. Wow. Like I haven't heard it in a long time. Well, as they say, we need the rain. But in any event, I'm hoping that the recording comes out okay. I hope you enjoyed Howard too. Outdated Wrestling Hour. .buzzsprout.com. That's our website. Listen to every episode we ever did. It's right there. Hit a button. You can listen right there. If you don't want to go find a podcast app, you can go to that website every time. In fact, I've been meaning to tell everybody this. I finally figured out a way to tell people what we are. Type in Outdated Wrestling Hour on any browser or Outdated Wrestling Hour Bob Smith. That works too. Boom. It comes right up. You can find out everything you need to know about the show as well as on our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com, where you can learn about our fan club. For a nominal fee, you can help perpetuate this show and the Outdated Entertainment Hour at the same time, where you can learn all about wrestling and learn all about Susan Kiger in Seven, starring William Smith. That was the action and B-film show we did with Brian R. Solomon, which is I'm still buzzing on. It's been a while now. I'm still buzzing over that show. I get to talk about stuff you don't talk about. You know, who comes out and says, I love driving horror triple features. It was such fun doing this show. I hope Brian will come back and we'll follow up on that one soon. That would be right up my alley. So anyway, yeah, Outdated Wrestling Hour. .buzzsprout.com. Learn all about our fan club. MRB, that's our theme song, Funky Bone. We play a little at the beginning and the whole thing at the end. So if you like that funky tune, stick around at the end after this announcement and you'll hear the whole doggone thing. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith singing with B.B. King. And, drumroll, we're on Blue Sky, social media app. Blue Sky, look for me there. Like so many people, we're making the venture to Blue Sky. So now I am Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook. I am also on what used to be known as Twitter, and I'll continue to make announcements there. But if you want to find out more, read my ridiculous rantings, come to Facebook, come to Blue Sky. I guess that's it for now. We're going to have another show next week. Hope you're on to enjoy it. And we hope you continue to join us every week on the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My name is Bob Smith. And you know what? I'll pay homage to a B-movie actress. In the words of Susan Kiger in Seven, come on, let's go.